We tend to think of the first Christians, our forebears, as a very committed group, and in many ways they were. After all, they were putting their lives on the line for Christ and for his message. But at the same time, we have been reading in Paul's letter to the Corinthians, his first letter, that some of the things that still bother us today already bothered them. So a few weeks ago, we heard his writing to them about the way in which they were trying to take precedence over one another. I'm better than you. I can do this better than you. I'm closer to Christ than you. And you remember that he was telling them that's not what it's about at all. Today, as he continues the letter, he addresses an issue that, first of all, might seem strange to us, but I think really still does continue today. Some of them are denying that they will rise from the dead in Christ. Yes, Jesus is risen. They weren't denying that at all. That's obvious from what Paul writes to them. But they're denying that that will happen to anyone else. Why would they do that? Maybe in part because they were expecting Jesus to return very soon, thought everyone in the community would be alive when he came back, but now some of them were dying, and they were beginning to question this. But I wonder if another reason was that they were doing exactly what is a temptation for us today, and that is to look on the fullness of life in Christ as simply something going on up in heaven somewhere, and forgetting, despite the fact that we say it in the Creed each week, that the essence of our faith is that ultimately our goal is not heaven. Ultimately, our goal is the fullness of risen life in a new heavens and a new earth. For Christians, this belief in the value and the importance of this life is an essential part of our faith. Some other religions will say, no, this life really isn't important. The idea is to get beyond it and be assumed somewhere else. Yes, we believe that after our immediate death there will be a bringing somewhere else. But as Paul reminded us today, the essence of what we believe is that we will rise again, that we continue to be who we are. Yes, it will be a new body, a spiritual body. We don't know what that means, but it will be risen on a new earth. Because that is so essential to what we believe and who we are, we as Christians have always had a tremendous commitment to life, to preserving the life of others, to supporting the life of others, to safeguarding our own lives. We see death as a terrible thing. Yes, it can lead to something else, but it's not something that's good. The fact that we dislike it, that we try to put it off, that's indeed connected in with who we are as a people of faith. And it's for that reason that our church has taught for centuries the value of all human life, including unborn human life, including the life of those who are oppressed and in need, including safeguarding the planet so that life can live on it. Perhaps then it's more than a coincidence that we read these words of Paul as we find ourselves facing the decision of our legislature and our governor now that even in the third trimester, for particular reasons, yes, but still, even in the third trimester, human life can be taken away from the unborn child. You'll find in the bulletin today a letter from Bishop Barris, and I would invite you to read it. You'll find in that also an invitation by him to listen to a video talk that he gave that you can get to on YouTube or through our parish website, and I would invite you to look at that. So I'm not going to say that much more about this issue right now. We'll let the bishop speak to us. I will write some more about it next week in Thoughts from the Tower. But I would just like to suggest two things. The bishop does invite us more and more to become active in our support for all human life, from conception through natural death. As we try to do that, there will be moments when people will say to us, they may have already said this to you, well, the church shouldn't impose its teaching on others. And that's absolutely true. Our church believes that. You find that in the writings of the Vatican Council. But supporting human life is not taking some kind of arcane church teaching and forcing it on non-Catholics, on non-Christians. It's a support for human life, which is a basic human value, not primarily a religious one. I find myself, when people raise that objection, saying to them, you're absolutely right. I have no right to try to impose my religious beliefs on you. But that's not what I'm doing. I'm suggesting to you the inestimable value of every human life. That goes far beyond the teachings of my church or of any religion. The second suggestion I would make, as we try to have some impact on this, is to realize that ultimately, yes, legislation is important and the courts are important, but ultimately things are not going to change in our country until we change hearts, until we change people's attitudes. And we're not going to do that by yelling at them. We're not going to do that by supporting politicians who aren't really committed to life, but simply trying to use that to get our votes. We're going to do that by, as the bishop suggests in his letter, by our own prayer, by our own study, by our own commitment in all different ways to support, to celebrate the meaning, the value of all human life. As I say, I suggest taking a look at the bishop's letter, at the video, and I'll write some more, hopefully complementing that next week. Because there's one other thing that I would want to mention. We've been talking about the Alpha program that we'll be doing beginning in Lent. You'll also find more information on that in today's bulletin or on the website. And you'll find there a registration form for it. As I mentioned before, it is a commitment. It's an 8-week commitment. And you can't just come every once in a while. It is asking for your coming for that entire time. Yeah, that's a big commitment. But the people in the other parishes who have done that have found it a worthwhile commitment, have found it a valuable commitment, have found it a commitment that has rewarded them deeply and tremendously. So I would invite you to bring that to prayer, to think about whether you might be called, might be able to make that commitment for yourselves. Again, I won't say any more about it. I've gone on long enough now, but you'll find much more information in the bulletin.